Well, some big movement in the trade war between the world's two largest economies. The Trump administration announced that there's going to be a 90-day suspension on most of the recently levied tariffs on Chinese imports coming into the U.S. and vice versa.
This is the apparent result of trade representatives from both countries getting together in Switzerland over the weekend. And ABC News national correspondent Steven Portnoy brings us the details from Washington. So, Steven, which tariffs stay in place and which are going away, even if just temporarily?
Well, the tariffs that are going away are the ones that the president put in place over the last couple of months. So we're essentially right back to where we started in the early weeks of the Trump administration. There was a 10% tariff on China, supplemented by a tariff on China with respect to the fentanyl crisis. And those tariffs, about 30%, will remain in place during this 90-day pause. The Chinese will similarly reduce their reciprocal tariffs that they put in place as a measure of retaliation. The markets are still off about 7% from the president's inauguration, but have recovered their losses from early April, Liberation Day. And so now there's a framework for future conversations on issues of mutual concern on both sides. The Chinese and American officials will try to work out a broader agreement, but for now, there's a cessation of hostilities in the trade war.
So do we have a timetable on when we're going to see them getting back together, the U.S. and China? Is there a schedule or just a pause so far?
I don't see a schedule in front of me, but I hear both sides talking about the idea that they will meet wherever the other side is willing.
So this is not really helping people who are trying to plan on the products that they're going to buy and try and have on the store shelves for Christmas. But I am hearing a lot of talk from economists that this is a substantial de-escalation.
Oh, it's certainly that. And you could see investors reacting. I mean, the market futures are up huge this morning. There is a concern about the damage that's been done. I mean, heaven help you if you got nervous and stopped investing or sold your stocks in early April because you missed out. But, and you're a victim of all this. But if you didn't, then well, you've seen your portfolio recover. And there's a concern about the potential impact on supply chains. What we have seen in recent weeks as this trade war escalated was American manufacturers and retailers cutting off some of their purchases from China. Part of the president's intent, frankly, to apply pressure on Beijing and to see about, a diversification, if you will, of the marketplace, so that perhaps, importers might choose goods from other countries or maybe at best here in the United States if they can find a supplier. But now that the tariffs are coming down, you might see the kind of supply chain crunch that could result in higher prices because all of a sudden goods are flowing to market at the same time. There may be some difficulty with that. And, beyond that, there's just the idea of, the pressure that the president was under. In recent weeks, he was talking about American children having to do with fewer dolls and pencils, and that's just the way it's going to have to be. Well, the tariffs have now come down. The question I think that will be asked of the White House this morning is, what has this all been about? If it's merely just trying to get China to the table, they've accomplished that, but not much else.
What about tariff negotiations with other countries? We know we made one with a deal with the UK, but anybody else?
Well, we've not heard, but the president in recent weeks was talking about 200 deals that he said he'd already made. We've seen two.
That is ABC News national correspondent Steven Portnoy joining us this morning from Washington.
Sharper Point Commentary.
If you've been terrified by Trump's tariffs, you can rest easy today, and maybe for a few more todays. That's because the biggest of those tariffs, the ones that worried economists the most because they stood to raise the prices we the little people pay the most, the ones on imports coming from China, are going away. For now. Well, some of them. And you can rest easy unless you're someone who fears the future. Then go ahead and continue to panic. But realize there's a price to pay for that panic, and not just a mental health price to pay, but some actual dollars. In what's being called a substantial de-escalation of the trade war between the world's two largest economies, the Trump administration announced that there will be a 90-day suspension of most of the recently levied tariffs on Chinese imports entering the U.S. and vice versa. ABC News national correspondent Steven Portnoy explained to us which tariffs are going away and which will stay.
We're essentially right back to where we started in the early weeks of the Trump administration. There was a 10% tariff on China, supplemented by a tariff on China with respect to the fentanyl crisis. And those tariffs, about 30%, will remain in place during this 90-day pause. The Chinese will similarly reduce their reciprocal tariffs that they put in place as a measure of retaliation.
For those of us who fear the future, I try not to put myself in that category very often, but it does happen. I got to ask this question. What happens next, Steven?
Chinese and American officials will try to work out a broader agreement. But for now, there's a cessation of hostilities in the trade war.
And while this announcement has helped many of us climb, at least a little bit, out of the stock hole our retirement funds have fallen into, Steven points out there are many who won't have that chance.
Heaven help you if you got nervous and stopped investing or sold your stocks in early April because you missed out. But if you didn't, then you've seen your portfolio recover.
Yeah, that's those of us who don't do the panicky thing where you buy high and sell low. I tend to lean conservative on economic issues. The smaller the government is, the better, and that's why I have not been a big fan of the tariff scheme that Donald Trump hatched, unless it led to punishing the countries that really do cheat us, not the ones who simply sell us more than they buy from us. That's called a trade imbalance, and that's not cheating. But what China does on so many levels is cheating, and they need to be punished. So I'm okay with Trump raising my prices to fund big government if it leads to China feeling pain and fearing the future. But so I don't continue to fear the future and let that affect my future, my politics try to not play a part in my portfolio. We'll see, though.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.